A racist police officer is patrolling a wealthy neighborhood when he spots a black man on a walk. The officer assumes the man must be up to no good and arrests him for no reason. Afterwards, the officer is informed that he arrested a high-ranking general in the United States Army. General Michael Adams strolled down one of these tree-lined streets, his footsteps soft on the pavement. Michael was tall, with a strong, athletic build that hinted at his years of service in the military. Despite his casual appearance, there was an air of authority about him, something in his posture and the way he carried himself. Michael had been in this neighborhood many times before, though not everyone knew it. He owned a house just a few blocks away, one that he'd purchased years ago as a quiet retreat from the demands of his career. This was where he came to think, to unwind, and to escape the rigors of his responsibilities. Today, he decided to take a walk, as he often did, enjoying the late afternoon sun and the quiet of the streets. The sun dipped lower, casting longer shadows, and Michael continued his walk, unaware of the events that would soon shatter this quiet routine. For now, he was just another person enjoying the simplicity of a late summer afternoon, finding peace in the ordinary moments that life had to offer. Officer James Davis adjusted his rearview mirror as he drove slowly down the street, his eyes scanning the neighborhood like a hawk searching for prey. His patrol car rolled along at a crawl, the engine purring softly. It was a routine he'd done countless times before, ensuring the streets of this affluent suburb stayed safe and orderly. Davis took pride in his work, believing himself to be the line of defense against anything that might disturb the peace of the community. The neighborhood was quiet, almost too quiet. Davis's hand rested on the steering wheel, fingers tapping absent-mindedly to a tune he could barely hear over the car's hum. He watched the familiar sights pass by, children's bicycles leaning against fences, gardeners trimming hedges, and the occasional jogger or dog walker. Everything seemed normal. Then he saw him, a black man walking alone down the street, casual as you please. Davis's eyes narrowed as he took in the man's appearance. He was tall, muscular, wearing a plain white t-shirt and jeans. His stride was relaxed, and he didn't appear to be in any hurry. There was nothing particularly alarming about him, but something about the sight set off alarms in Davis's mind. He didn't recognize the man, and that alone was enough to make him suspicious. "Who are you?" Davis muttered under his breath as he kept his eyes on the man. "What are you doing here?" Davis had been on the force for 10 years, long enough to trust his instincts, and his instincts were telling him something was off. This was an affluent, predominantly white neighborhood. In Davis's experience, anyone who didn't fit the usual mold was often up to no good. Maybe the guy was lost, or maybe he was scoping out houses. Either way, Davis wasn't going to just drive by without finding out more. He slowed the car even further, keeping pace with the man's walk. As he passed, he saw the man look over at the car briefly, his expression calm and indifferent. Davis's jaw tightened. That calmness irked him. It was as if the man wasn't concerned about his presence at all, as if he belonged there. Davis didn't like it. He made a quick decision, pulling his patrol car over to the curb and parking. He stepped out, adjusting his belt and the radio clipped to his shoulder. The man continued walking, seemingly unaware of the officer's approach. Davis felt a flicker of annoyance. He raised his voice as he moved toward the man. "Hey, you there!" Davis called out. The man stopped and turned to face Davis. He looked directly at him, his eyes steady and unflinching. "Yes, officer. Is there a problem?" he asked. Davis didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took a moment to assess the man up close. The man's face was calm, his stance relaxed, as if he didn't see Davis as a threat. That only heightened Davis's suspicion. "What are you doing here?" Davis demanded, his tone sharp. "Just taking a walk," the man replied evenly. "Is that not allowed?" Davis frowned. He didn't like the man's tone, so calm and unbothered. It made him feel like he wasn't in control of the situation, and Davis liked being in control. He took a step closer, squaring his shoulders. "I'm going to need to see some ID," Davis said, his voice carrying authority. The man raised an eyebrow but didn't move. "Why? Am I being accused of something?" Davis's patience was wearing thin. "This is a private neighborhood. We don't usually see people like you around here. I have the right to question anyone who seems out of place." The man sighed softly, and Davis's annoyance grew. "I live nearby," the man said. "Just a few blocks over. I'm not doing anything wrong, officer. I'm simply enjoying a walk." "Show me some ID," Davis repeated, his hand moving instinctively toward his belt, where his radio and other tools of authority hung. He wasn't in the mood for resistance. His training had taught him that control was everything in these situations. The man reached into his pocket, slowly and deliberately, pulling out his wallet. He held it up, showing Davis his identification. Davis took it, glancing at the name and address. His eyes flickered with surprise for a brief moment. The address was indeed a local one, but something still didn't sit right with him. Maybe it was the man's calm demeanor, or maybe it was just Davis's own sense of duty kicking in. "I've never seen you around here before," Davis said, his tone still firm. "How long have you lived here?" "Several years," the man replied. "I'm not out much, usually working. I don't see why this is necessary." Davis felt the heat rising in his face. He didn't like being questioned, especially not by someone who seemed to think they were above suspicion. His grip tightened on the man's ID. "Necessary or not, I have a job to do," Davis snapped. "We've had reports of suspicious activity in the area. I need to make sure everything is in order." The man remained silent, his eyes still locked on Davis. There was no fear in his expression, no sign of backing down. Davis hated that. He was the one in charge here, not some stranger who thought he could walk wherever he pleased. He had to assert his authority. "Stay right here," Davis ordered. "Don't move." He turned, heading back to his patrol car to run the ID. His heart was beating a little faster now, a mix of irritation and something else. Something he didn't want to admit was doubt. As he reached the car, Davis cast another glance at the man, who stood quietly, waiting. The unease in Davis's chest grew. Something about this whole situation didn't feel right, but he pushed that thought aside. He was an officer of the law, and it was his job to keep this neighborhood safe. He couldn't afford to second-guess himself. Not now. Davis sat in his patrol car, eyes on the man through the rearview mirror. As he started typing the man's details into the system, a sense of unease lingered, hanging in the air like a storm cloud waiting to break. Michael stood on the sidewalk, watching as Officer Davis walked back to his patrol car. He felt the weight of the officer's scrutiny even from a distance. The street was still, the quiet broken only by the faint chirping of birds and the hum of Davis's patrol car. Michael kept his breathing steady, maintaining his calm demeanor. He had nothing to hide. He knew he hadn't done anything wrong, but the way Davis looked at him, the questions, and the demand for his ID, it all made his muscles tense. Michael's mind replayed the exchange. The officer's tone, his insistence that Michael was out of place, the way his hand had hovered near his belt as if ready for anything. Michael knew that look. He had seen it many times during his service, a mix of suspicion and authority, often directed at those considered different or out of place. It was a look that could escalate into something much worse if not handled carefully. Michael glanced around. A few people were watching from a distance now, peering through windows or pausing in their yards, curious about what was happening. A middle-aged man with a garden hose in hand stared openly, water spilling onto the sidewalk. A woman walking her dog had stopped, her phone out, as if ready to record. Michael met her eyes briefly and she looked away. He took a slow, deep breath. This was the last thing he had wanted, a scene, a confrontation. Davis was still in his car, tapping away at his computer. Michael knew the officer was running his ID, checking his records, trying to find something to justify this stop. Michael had seen it before, the fishing for reasons when there weren't any to begin with. It didn't sit well with him, but he also knew reacting with anger wouldn't help. Patience, he reminded himself. Let it play out. Davis emerged from the patrol car, the ID still in his hand. His face was a mask of irritation. He walked back over to Michael, stopping just a foot away, standing a little taller, trying to assert dominance. "Your record's clean," Davis said, almost as if he was disappointed. "But that doesn't explain why you're here." "I already told you," Michael replied calmly. "I live here. I'm out for a walk. That's all." Davis's eyes narrowed. "And I told you, we've had reports of suspicious activity. It's my job to check things out." Michael kept his gaze steady. "I understand that, officer, but I'm not causing any trouble. I'm just walking." Davis's frustration was evident now. His face flushed slightly, a frown creasing his forehead. He glanced around, noticing the small audience they had attracted. He didn't like being challenged, especially not in front of others. Michael could sense the shift, the subtle edge creeping into the officer's stance. "Look," Davis said, his voice lowering, "we can do this the easy way, or we can do it the hard way. You tell me exactly what you're doing here, or I take you in for further questioning. It's up to you." Michael felt a flicker of anger, but kept it in check. He knew this tactic, intimidation, pushing until the other person cracked. "I've told you everything you need to know," Michael replied evenly. "You're making a mistake." Davis's jaw tightened. "The only mistake I see is someone thinking they can walk around this neighborhood without being questioned. Now, are you going to cooperate, or do I need to escalate this?" Michael's patience was wearing thin. He had tried to reason, tried to explain, but Davis wasn't listening. This wasn't about safety. It was about control, about asserting authority over someone he perceived as a threat based solely on appearance. Michael glanced at the people watching, then back at Davis. "Officer, I'm not resisting," Michael said, keeping his voice steady. "But I also know my rights. You have no grounds to arrest me. I've done nothing wrong." Davis's eyes flashed with anger. "I'll decide what's wrong and what's right," he snapped. Without warning, he reached out, grabbing Michael by the arm. "You're coming with me." Michael tensed as Davis's grip tightened, his training kicking in. He could easily overpower the officer, but he knew that would only escalate the situation further. He let Davis pull him toward the patrol car, feeling the roughness of the cuffs being snapped onto his wrists. "Is this really necessary?" Michael asked, his voice calm but firm. Davis ignored him, shoving Michael toward the back of the car. "Get in!" he barked. Michael complied, sitting down in the back seat, his hands cuffed behind him. He looked out at the gathering onlookers, their expressions a mix of confusion and concern. The woman with the dog had her phone raised, recording the entire scene. Michael hoped that would be enough to keep things from getting worse. As Davis slammed the door shut, Michael felt a wave of frustration wash over him. He had come out for a peaceful walk, something to clear his mind, and now he was sitting in the back of a patrol car, treated like a criminal, all because of the color of his skin and the assumptions that came with it. He could hear Davis radioing in, his voice tense, as he explained the situation to the station. Michael leaned back in the seat, taking another deep breath. He knew this wasn't over. Not yet. And as much as he wanted to fight back, he knew he had to stay calm, to keep his composure. Because this wasn't just about him, it was about something much bigger, something he had faced his whole life. And now, sitting in the back of a patrol car with his hands cuffed, Michael was reminded that the fight for respect and equality was far from over. The ride to the police station was silent, but the tension was palpable. Michael sat in the back of the patrol car, his wrists still bound by the cold metal of the handcuffs. He kept his eyes forward, ignoring the occasional glance Officer Davis threw at him through the rearview mirror. The scenery blurred by, the tree-lined streets of the neighborhood giving way to the busy roads leading into town. Michael's mind was racing, not with fear, but with a sense of disbelief at how quickly a simple walk had turned into this. Davis pulled into the station, parking the car in a lot filled with police vehicles. He stepped out, yanking open the back door and grabbing Michael by the arm. The station was buzzing with activity, officers moving in and out, talking on radios, carrying files. As Davis led Michael inside, a few officers glanced their way, curiosity flickering in their eyes. Davis ignored them, marching Michael down the hallway toward the holding area. Michael felt the eyes of the other officers on him, heard the murmur of whispers. It wasn't the first time he had been the subject of scrutiny, but it was the first time it had happened like this. On the wrong side of the law he had sworn to protect. Michael had spent his life upholding order, defending his country, and now he was being paraded through a police station like a common criminal. Davis pushed open a door to a small room, guiding Michael inside. It was a typical holding room, bare walls, a table, and 2 chairs. Davis motioned for Michael to sit. As Michael complied, Davis stood by the door, arms crossed, a self-satisfied look on his face. "You'll stay here until we get this sorted out," Davis said, his tone clipped. Michael met his gaze evenly. "What exactly are we sorting out, officer? You have my ID. You know where I live. What more do you need?" Davis's eyes hardened. "I need to know why you were in that neighborhood. Why you thought you could just walk around like you owned the place." Michael sighed, his frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "I wasn't doing anything wrong. I live in that neighborhood. I've done nothing to warrant this treatment." Davis's face flushed. "People like you don't just walk around neighborhoods like that without a reason," he snapped. "You could have been casing houses looking for an opportunity." Michael's eyes narrowed. "People like me?" he repeated. "What exactly do you mean by that, officer?" Davis's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence, the tension thick in the air. Michael could sense Davis's anger, his need to assert control, to prove a point. Michael knew that this wasn't about him personally, it was about what he represented to Davis, a disruption of the order he was so desperate to maintain. The door opened, and Sergeant Laura Smith stepped in. She was a tall woman with short brown hair, her expression one of professionalism mixed with concern. She glanced at Davis, then at Michael, her eyes assessing the situation. Michael recognized her type, calm, composed, a voice of reason in the middle of chaos. "What's going on here?" Sergeant Smith asked, her voice steady. Davis straightened. "Found him walking in the upscale neighborhood, acting suspicious. He refused to explain himself, so I brought him in." Smith looked at Michael, her gaze sharp but fair. Is that true? Michael nodded slightly. I was out for a walk. Officer Davis questioned me, and I provided my ID, explained that I lived nearby. That wasn't enough for him. Smith turned to Davis. And did you run his ID? Yes, Davis replied quickly. It came back clean, but you still brought him in? Smith interrupted, her tone firm. On what grounds? Davis hesitated, clearly uncomfortable under Smith's scrutiny. He was acting suspicious, he insisted. I was doing my job, keeping the neighborhood safe. Smith sighed, crossing her arms. This man is a high-ranking general in the United States Army, she said, her voice low but clear. You've brought him in without cause, in handcuffs no less. Do you understand the implications of this? Davis blinked, clearly taken aback. He glanced at Michael, then back at Smith. I didn't know, he stammered. Smith's eyes narrowed. It shouldn't matter who he is. Your job is to protect and serve, not to judge based on appearances. This is unacceptable, Davis. Release him immediately. Davis fumbled with the keys, stepping forward to unlock the cuffs. Michael's wrists were freed, and he rubbed them lightly, feeling the ache from the tight grip of the metal. He stood, towering over Davis but keeping his demeanor calm. Sergeant Smith, Michael said, his voice steady, thank you for your professionalism. But this isn't just about me. This is about how people like Officer Davis approach their duty. Smith nodded. I agree. We'll discuss this further, General Adams. Rest assured this incident will be handled appropriately. Michael looked at Davis, who still appeared stunned. I hope this is a wake-up call, Michael said quietly. Judging someone by their appearance can lead to mistakes, dangerous ones. Smith gestured toward the door. Let's take this to my office, she said. We need to address what happened here today. As they left the holding room, Michael walked alongside Smith, feeling the eyes of the other officers on him. He knew this wasn't over, but it was a start. Conversations needed to be had, changes needed to be made. And if this was the catalyst, then so be it. Back in Smith's office, Michael sat across from her as she began writing a report. Davis was left standing outside, his face a mix of confusion and embarrassment. Michael watched him through the glass window, thinking about the long road ahead. It wasn't just about one officer's actions. It was about the culture that allowed those actions to happen in the first place. Michael had spent his life fighting battles. This was another one, and he intended to see it through. The fight for respect, for equality, didn't end on the battlefield. It extended to every street, every neighborhood, in every interaction. Smith set down her pen, looking up at Michael. I'm sorry for what happened, she said. We'll make sure this doesn't go unnoticed. Michael nodded. It's not about apologies, Sergeant. It's about making sure this doesn't happen again. To anyone. Smith nodded in agreement. We'll start with Officer Davis, and then we'll look at the bigger picture. Change doesn't happen overnight, but it has to start somewhere. The small office of Sergeant Laura Smith was filled with an uneasy silence. Michael sat across from her, hands resting on his knees, his face calm but alert. Sergeant Smith had just finished taking down notes from Michael's account of the incident. Her pen lay on the desk, forgotten, as she considered what to do next. Outside, the murmur of the station's activities continued, but in here, the tension was almost palpable. Smith took a deep breath, breaking the silence. General Adams, she began, I want to assure you that what happened today is not how we operate. Officer Davis's actions were out of line. This kind of behavior isn't tolerated here. Michael nodded slightly, keeping his expression neutral. I appreciate that, Sergeant, but I've seen this sort of thing happen too many times. It's not about one officer. It's about the mindset that allows this to keep happening. Smith's eyes flickered with understanding. She had been in law enforcement long enough to know that Michael was right. It wasn't just about one incident. It was about the deeper issues that needed addressing. She had joined the force to make a difference, to uphold the law fairly, and incidents like this made her realize how far they still had to go. General Adams, Smith said carefully, if you're willing, I'd like to hear more about your perspective on this, your experience both today and in your career. It might help us understand how to prevent this from happening again. Michael leaned forward, his eyes meeting Smith's. Sergeant, I've spent my life in service. I've led troops, made decisions in combat, dealt with crises of all kinds, and I've faced prejudice, quiet and not so quiet, but today was different. I was treated like a criminal for doing nothing more than walking in my own neighborhood. I've fought for this country, and yet I'm seen as a threat because of how I look. Smith listened, her face serious. We're here to protect everyone, General. But you're right. Sometimes we let our own biases cloud our judgment. Davis, he's been a good officer, but this isn't the first time I've heard concerns about his behavior. Michael nodded. It's not just about punishing Davis. It's about making sure every officer understands that their duty is to protect, not to judge. This kind of racial profiling, it's dangerous. It breeds mistrust. And when the community can't trust its police, we've failed. Smith looked down at her notes. She had always prided herself on being fair, on treating people with respect, but she knew not everyone shared that approach. We'll be conducting an internal investigation, Smith said. Davis will be suspended pending the outcome. But more than that, we need to look at how we train our officers, how we engage with the community. Michael appreciated Smith's sincerity. She wasn't just saying the right things. She seemed committed to real change. Education and training are a start, Michael said, but it's also about accountability. Officers need to understand that there are consequences for actions like this, not just for the person being profiled, but for the entire community. Smith nodded. We're going to start by holding Davis accountable, and then we'll move forward with reviewing our training programs. We need to build trust, not just enforce laws. Just then, the door to Smith's office opened, and Officer Davis stood there, looking hesitant. Smith gestured for him to come in. Davis stepped inside, standing stiffly by the door, his eyes darting between Smith and Michael. Officer Davis, Smith began, her tone measured. General Adams has explained his side of what happened today. We've run his background, and as you now know, he's a high-ranking officer in the United States Army. Your actions were unprofessional and uncalled for. Davis shifted uncomfortably, the color rising in his face. I didn't know he was a general, Davis said, his voice defensive. I thought he was up to something. I was just doing my job. Smith's eyes narrowed slightly. Your job is to protect and serve everyone in this community, not to make assumptions based on appearance. You brought in a man without cause, treated him like a suspect, and violated his rights. That's not doing your job. That's failing at it. Davis opened his mouth as if to argue, but then closed it again. He glanced at Michael, then back at Smith. I was just trying to keep the neighborhood safe, Davis said quietly. Michael stood up, facing Davis. Officer, safety isn't about targeting people who look different. It's about upholding justice, treating everyone with respect. I was out for a walk, that's all. And yet, you made me feel like a criminal in my own neighborhood. That's not keeping anyone safe. Davis's shoulders slumped slightly. He looked down, avoiding Michael's eyes. I'm sorry, he mumbled. I didn't mean for it to go this way. Michael watched him, the sincerity in Davis's apology seeming more out of fear than understanding. This isn't just about an apology, Michael said. It's about making sure this doesn't happen again, to anyone. Smith stood up, her posture firm. Officer Davis, you're suspended, effective immediately. There will be an investigation into your conduct, and depending on the outcome, further actions will be taken. Davis nodded, looking defeated. He turned and left the office without another word, the door closing behind him with a soft click. Smith watched him go, then turned back to Michael. We'll do better, she said. I'll make sure of it. Michael nodded. I believe you, Sergeant. But remember, this isn't just about Davis. It's about changing the culture that allows this kind of behavior to happen. It starts with leadership. It starts with officers like you. Smith sat back down, looking thoughtful. Thank you for your patience today, General. I know it hasn't been easy, but your words will make a difference. Michael took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the day begin to lift slightly. We all have a role to play, Sergeant. Let's make sure we play it well. He stood up, extending his hand. Smith shook it firmly, a silent agreement passing between them. As Michael left the office, he felt a sense of purpose. This incident, while unsettling, was a chance to spark change. It wasn't just about him. It was about making sure no one else had to go through what he did. Michael stepped out into the light, feeling a sense of resolve. There was a long road ahead, but at least now he wasn't walking it alone. The news of what had happened to General Michael Adams spread quickly through the police station and into the wider community. By the next day, whispers had turned into full-blown conversations. Officers huddled together in break rooms, talking in low voices, some glancing toward Officer Davis's empty desk. The air in the station was tense, charged with the knowledge that something significant had happened. Davis's suspension was more than just a disciplinary action. It was a signal that things were changing. Sergeant Laura Smith stood in front of the gathered officers at the morning briefing. Her expression was serious, her tone steady. As many of you know, Officer Davis has been suspended pending an internal investigation. The incident involving General Michael Adams was a violation of our standards. We're here to protect and serve all members of our community, and that includes treating everyone with respect and fairness. A murmur spread through the room. Some officers nodded in agreement. Others looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats. Smith noticed the varied reactions but pressed on. Our actions reflect on the entire department. Incidents like this erode public trust. We can't afford that. We have a responsibility to do better, to hold ourselves to the highest standards of conduct. One of the officers, a young man named Officer Ramirez, raised his hand. Sergeant, what's going to happen to Davis? Smith met his gaze. That will be determined by the investigation. For now, he's suspended. But I want to make it clear, this isn't just about Davis. It's about making sure we all understand the importance of our role in this community. Racial profiling has no place in this department. The room fell silent again, the weight of Smith's words settling over the officers. She continued, we'll be conducting additional training sessions on racial sensitivity and de-escalation tactics. I expect full participation. We have to learn from this and make sure it doesn't happen again. As the briefing ended, officers filed out of the room, some in deep thought, others whispering to each other. Smith watched them go, hoping her words had made an impact. She knew change wouldn't happen overnight, but it had to start somewhere. Meanwhile, General Michael Adams had returned to his usual routines, but his thoughts often drifted back to the incident. It wasn't just about what happened to him. It was about the broader implications. Michael had received a call from Smith, informing him about the investigation and the steps being taken to address the issue. He appreciated her efforts, but knew that this was just the beginning. That afternoon, Michael received an invitation to meet with the community leaders and police department representatives. They wanted to discuss what had happened and how to move forward. Michael agreed, understanding the importance of these conversations. The meeting was held at a local community center, a large room filled with chairs arranged in a circle. Michael arrived to find a mix of faces: police officers, community leaders, local activists, and a few residents. Sergeant Smith was there, along with Officer Ramirez and others from the department. Michael recognized some of the community leaders, people he had worked with on various initiatives over the years. As the meeting began, the air was thick with anticipation. A community leader named Mrs. Turner, an older woman with a kind but firm demeanor, stood up to address the group. Thank you all for coming, she began. We're here today because of an incident that brought to light issues we can no longer ignore. General Adams, we appreciate your willingness to share your experience and to be a part of this conversation. Michael nodded, feeling the eyes of everyone in the room on him. He took a deep breath before speaking. What happened to me was wrong, he said plainly. But this isn't just about me. It's about how we ensure that everyone in our community feels safe, respected, and treated fairly. It's about accountability. An officer named Collins, sitting next to Smith, spoke up. General, we want to do better. We're committed to making changes, but it's going to take time. What do you think we should focus on? Michael appreciated the openness of the question. Start with training, he replied, not just on racial sensitivity, but on how to engage with the community. Officers need to understand that their role is to protect, not intimidate, and there needs to be clear consequences for those who cross the line. Mrs. Turner nodded in agreement. Trust is key. Right now, there's a lot of mistrust, especially among minority communities. We need to see that the police are on our side, not against us. Sergeant Smith spoke next. We're implementing new training protocols immediately, and we're reviewing our policies on stops and searches. It's not just about punishment, it's about education and prevention. We want to build a partnership with the community, not create division. A local activist named Jordan, who had been quietly listening, raised his hand. It's good to hear that there's a commitment to change, and he said, but we need transparency. We need to know that when issues arise, they're addressed openly, not swept under the rug. Michael agreed. Transparency and accountability are critical. This can't just be about words. It has to be about actions. People need to see that changes are being made, that their voices are heard. The conversation continued, touching on various topics: community engagement programs, regular meetings between police and residents, and the importance of officers being seen as allies rather than enforcers. Ideas were shared, agreements were made, and a sense of cautious optimism began to take root. As the meeting wrapped up, Sergeant Smith approached Michael. Thank you for being here, she said. Your input is invaluable. We have a long way to go, but I believe we can make a real difference. Michael shook her hand. Change isn't easy, but it's necessary. I'm willing to work with you, with all of you, to make sure this community is a place where everyone feels safe. Smith nodded, a look of determination in her eyes. We'll do it together. As Michael left the community center, he felt a sense of hope. The conversations had been honest and constructive. There was still much work to be done, but the seeds of change had been planted. Michael knew that real change would take time, patience, and a lot of effort, but he was ready to see it through for himself, for his community, and for everyone who believed in justice and equality. The road ahead was long, but for the first time in a while, Michael felt like they were headed in the right direction. The atmosphere in the police station was different now. Officer James Davis's suspension had sent a clear message, and the morning briefings, which once felt routine, had taken on a new seriousness. There was a new emphasis on professionalism, respect, and accountability. Officers attended mandatory training sessions on racial sensitivity and de-escalation tactics, sessions that sparked uncomfortable but necessary conversations. In one of these sessions, Officer Ramirez sat with his fellow officers, listening as an instructor from the community relations team explained the importance of recognizing implicit biases. Ramirez had been on the force for a few years and considered himself fair and just. But as he listened, he realized that he, too, had made snap judgments based on appearances without even knowing it. The session encouraged officers to reflect on their behavior and think about how their actions could impact others. After the training, Ramirez caught up with Sergeant Laura Smith in the hallway. She had been organizing these sessions, pushing for real change within the department. He could see the determination in her eyes, but also the weariness. It wasn't easy, changing a culture that had been ingrained for years. "Sergeant," Ramirez began, walking alongside her, "these training sessions, they're opening a lot of eyes. I've heard other officers talking about things differently now. I think it's working." Smith glanced at him, a small smile tugging at her lips. "That's the goal, Beto," she said. "We can't just expect things to change overnight, but we have to start somewhere. Every conversation we have, every officer who starts thinking differently, it's a step in the right direction." Ramirez nodded. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened with Davis and General Adams. I've made mistakes too. Maybe not as obvious, but I've judged people before I even talked to them. This training is making me realize that." Smith placed a hand on Ramirez's shoulder. "We've all made mistakes. The important thing is that we learn from them and do better. It's not about perfection, it's about progress. The fact that you're recognizing this is a sign that we're moving forward." As they continued walking, Smith couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. The incident with General Michael Adams had shaken the department, but it had also sparked something important: self-reflection, awareness, and a genuine desire to improve. She knew there would still be resistance, officers who believed that nothing needed to change, but she also knew that many were starting to understand why this mattered. Meanwhile, Michael Adams was experiencing the ripple effects of his ordeal. He received calls and messages from neighbors, some expressing support, others apologizing for not intervening when they saw him being arrested. Michael appreciated the outreach, understanding that his experience had opened many eyes, not just within the police department. One afternoon, Michael was invited to speak at a community forum organized by the local neighborhood association. The forum aimed to foster dialogue between residents and law enforcement, to rebuild trust and address concerns. Michael agreed, recognizing the importance of these conversations. The community center was packed that evening. Residents filled the seats, and a group of officers, including Sergeant Smith and Officer Ramirez, stood at the back. Michael took the stage, looking out at the faces before him. There was a mixture of curiosity, concern, and hope in the crowd. Michael began speaking, his voice steady. "Thank you all for being here. What happened to me was a difficult experience, but it's one that has brought us together tonight. I want to start by saying that I believe in the power of community. I believe that we can work together to create a safe, inclusive environment for everyone." He paused, letting his words settle over the audience. "But that means we have to confront uncomfortable truths. We have to acknowledge that bias and prejudice exist. We have to understand that safety is not just about protection from crime, but also about ensuring that every individual feels respected and valued, regardless of how they look." An elderly man in the front row raised his hand. "General Adams," he said, "I've lived in this neighborhood for over 30 years. I've seen it change, but I never thought something like this could happen here. How can we make sure it doesn't happen again?" Michael nodded. "It starts with awareness," he replied. "Awareness of our own biases, awareness of how our actions affect others. The police department is implementing new training, but it's not just about the officers. It's about all of us. We need to hold each other accountable. If we see something that isn't right, we need to speak up. It's about building trust through action." Another hand went up, this time a young woman in the back. "What can we do as residents? How can we help?" "Get involved," Michael said. "Attend these forums. Have conversations with your neighbors. Get to know the officers who patrol our streets. The more we engage, the stronger our community becomes. It's about building relationships and understanding." Sergeant Smith stepped forward, joining Michael at the front. "General Adams is right," she said. We're committed to making changes within the department, but we need your help. We're your police force, and we want to serve you effectively. We're here to listen, to learn, and to improve. The forum continued for over an hour, with residents voicing their concerns, asking questions, and offering suggestions. The atmosphere was open and respectful, a marked difference from the tension that had filled the air after Michael's arrest. By the end of the evening, there was a sense of unity, a shared commitment to moving forward together. As the crowd began to disperse, Michael found himself surrounded by neighbors, each wanting to shake his hand, thank him for speaking up, or share their own experiences. He listened, offering words of encouragement and understanding. He felt the power of community, the strength that came from standing together. Sergeant Smith approached Michael as the room began to empty. "That was powerful," she said. "You've made a real impact. People are listening." Michael smiled. "This is just the beginning, Sergeant. We've started a conversation, and now we need to keep it going. Change takes time, but tonight was a step in the right direction." Smith nodded. "Agreed. We'll keep pushing forward. Together." As Michael left the community center that night, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The events of the past days had been challenging, but they had also been transformative. The tides were turning, slowly but surely. Michael knew that there would be more work to do, more conversations to have, but he was ready for it. Change was happening, and for the first time in a long while, Michael felt hopeful. He looked up at the night sky, stars shining brightly above, and took a deep breath. There was still a long way to go, but he had faith that they were on the right path. A few weeks had passed since the community forum, and a new sense of awareness had settled over the neighborhood and the police department. Conversations about respect, bias, and justice continued to echo in the halls of the police station and in the living rooms of homes. There was a shared understanding that, while progress had been made, the work was far from over. Michael Adams resumed his daily walks, just as he had before the incident. Only this time, things felt different. The stares that once held suspicion were now replaced with nods of acknowledgement and friendly waves. Neighbors who had previously kept their distance now approached him with smiles, eager to exchange a few words. Michael appreciated these small gestures. They were signs that his message had been heard. That change, however gradual, was taking root. One crisp morning, Michael strolled down the familiar tree-lined streets, the autumn leaves crunching underfoot. He passed a group of children playing in their front yard, their laughter filling the air. A woman was out walking her dog and gave him a nod and a warm smile as she passed by him. "Good morning, General Adams," she called out. "Morning and all," Michael replied, tipping his head in return. As he continued his walk, Michael noticed a patrol car slowly approaching from the opposite direction. For a moment, his muscles tensed, a reflex from the memory of his last encounter. But as the car drew nearer, he recognized Officer Ramirez behind the wheel. Ramirez rolled down his window and smiled. "Good morning, General," Ramirez said, his tone friendly. "How are you today?" Michael returned the smile, feeling a sense of ease. "I'm well, Officer Ramirez. Just out enjoying the weather." Ramirez nodded. "Good to hear. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. We're here for the community, after all." Michael appreciated the sentiment. "Thank you, officer. It's good to see things moving in the right direction." As Ramirez drove off, Michael felt a wave of gratitude. It wasn't just about the changes in policies or the new training programs. It was about the shift in mindset, the willingness of individuals to engage and learn. Michael continued his walk, passing more neighbors who greeted him with friendly nods and hellos. The neighborhood, which once felt like a place of judgment, was beginning to feel like home. Later that day, Michael had a meeting scheduled with Sergeant Laura Smith at the police station. She had invited him to discuss the ongoing reforms and hear his thoughts on their progress. As Michael entered the station, he noticed a different atmosphere. There was a sense of purpose, of professionalism. Officers moved with intent, some of them pausing to greet Michael as he passed. In Smith's office, the sergeant stood to greet Michael, offering a firm handshake. "General Adams, thank you for coming. Please have a seat." Michael sat down, appreciating Smith's direct approach. She got straight to the point, a trait Michael respected. "I wanted to give you an update on the investigation," Smith said. "Officer Davis has been formally dismissed from the force. The investigation confirmed that his actions were in violation of department policies. His dismissal wasn't just about punishment. It was about setting a standard for what we expect from our officers." Michael nodded. "I think that was the right decision. Davis's behavior was unacceptable, and his actions undermined the trust between the police and the community." Smith sighed, looking thoughtful. "It's not an easy thing, letting someone go, but we need officers who are committed to fairness and justice. We've implemented new training protocols, and we're focusing on community engagement. Officers are now required to attend monthly workshops on de-escalation and cultural awareness. We're also organizing regular community meetings to maintain open lines of communication. Michael was pleased to hear this. These are important steps, Sergeant. I've noticed the difference already. The way the officers are interacting with the community, it's changed. People feel heard. Smith smiled. We've received positive feedback. The community feels more connected, more willing to engage with us. It's encouraging to see how a little change in attitude can make a big difference. Michael leaned forward, his voice serious. But we can't stop here. We need to keep this momentum going. It's not just about policies and training, it's about culture. We need to create a culture of respect, where every officer understands that their duty is to protect and serve everyone without bias. Smith nodded. I agree. We've made progress, but there's still more to do. I'm committed to seeing this through, and I know others are too. Michael stood up, extending his hand once more. Thank you, Sergeant, for your leadership and for taking this seriously. Change isn't easy, but together we can make a difference. Smith shook his hand firmly. Thank you, General Adams. Your courage in speaking out has been a catalyst for these changes. We won't forget that. As Michael left the station, he felt a sense of closure. The incident that had started with suspicion and hostility had led to meaningful dialogue and real change. It was a reminder that even difficult situations could be opportunities for growth. Michael was proud of the steps they had taken, but he knew that vigilance was key. The fight for justice and equality required constant effort and commitment.